As promised, I'll now show you how to replace your wheel bearings and how to adjust your brakes as well. Now, if I'm taking my drums off, I always just leave the car connected to the Caravan because we're going to have to leave the handbrake off on the Caravan to get the drums off. So whenever you're going to jack up, just make sure you use a designated jacking points on your Caravan. I highly recommend jacking up each wheel individually and having a jack stand in place. And never climb under your Caravan or car without extra support. Now to take the caps off, I just use a pair of multi-grips. Get the right size and just give it a nice sharp wobble. There you go. And that comes off nice and easily without damaging it. You can get a screwdriver in there and start probing and all that, but your chances of damaging it are increased. Just going to take this split pin out. Always replace these split pins with new ones as well. Most of these castellated nuts will go anti-clockwise to undo. So to take these off now, we just want to hold this bearing in here so it doesn't actually fall out when we move this drum. And we're just going to give it a little bit of a wiggle. So this is going to be a pretty messy job, so just make sure you've got a heap of rags here on standby too. Going to get heaps of grease all over the place. Now, when it comes to bearings, scrimp and scrape on other items, not bearings. Make sure you get the really, really good ones. Now, these are NSK, you can get Timken. All those really, really good ones are made in Japan as well, but they're just the quality of the cheap ones compared to the proper ones. You're probably going to save money in the long run anyway, because the cheap ones are going to give you all sorts of drama. Now, the bearings and the cups come together in these kits. Now you want to make sure that you keep the bearing with the cup because they're actually mated. All right, so first of all, we're just going to take out, make sure you keep that washer. We'll take out the bearing out of there. You can see there that that's actually due for changing. I don't know if you can see, it's got like a gold or a browny tinge on that bearing. So that means that it's pretty much due to replace. I'll just flip over the drum. Another thing we're looking for now in terms of brakes is to make sure that around the inside of the drum here, we don't have any scoring. If you do, you're going to have to get the drums machined. Now, it doesn't hurt to get the drums machined every now and then anyway, especially if you're going to replace your shoes. And also on the inside face here is where your brake magnet runs. Just make sure that there's not too much scoring there. You will see a little bit of scoring, but that feels generally pretty good. I'm going to turn this back over and just going to pop out that seal and that bearing, and I'll show you how. All right, so the best way is, I'm going to replace these anyway, is to just grab a big socket, bit of an extension bar and a hammer and just give it a bit of a tap around. There we have it. There's the bearing. There's the seal. So now I want to just clean out all the old grease from in the hub. Get rid of that before we take out the cup. Now, if you're going to use your fingers like me, just be careful you don't get any sharp edges because it'll end up losing a bit of claret. Now, by maintaining your wheel bearings and greasing them all the time, you can see that grease there. That's pretty good. It's not dark. It hasn't been burnt, so that's a good thing. So to remove the cup's quite a simple process, but what you want to make sure is you've got the right tools for it. So you can see here, I've got this punch here, and make sure it's got some nice sharp edges. It's not rounded off, because what we want to do is we're going to come from the opposite side. We're going to tip this over in a second. And you can see underneath this cup here, it's got a very slight, I hope this camera's up the right way. It's got a very slight lip just in here. And we're just going to tap that out all the way around, and that cup's going to come out because it's actually a press fit. We'll just tap it on all edges. There we go. One cup removed. Just going to make sure that you don't score anything in here as well, because we want to make sure the cup sits in nice and flush, and it's going to go right up against that face. Do the same with the opposite side. And there's our outer cup. Now I just want to make sure that I clean all this thoroughly now in here before we put our new cups in. Now just prior to fitting the bearings and the cups, I'm just going to clean this up. They've got a bit of a protective coating they put on them in the factory. So we'll clean that off. You can use something like carby cleaner. I mean, back in the 80s we used to use petrol, but petrol's too expensive now, isn't it? So now that everything's perfectly clean and dry, it's a really simple process to put the cup in. So the trick to it is you just got to make sure it's even all the way around. So we're just going to tap this very, very lightly and just make sure it goes in nice and even. You can use a block of wood or whatever, but I'm not tapping this hard enough to be able to cause any damage on here. And you can hear that now that it's actually flush. We're going to grab that same punch again, just making sure that it's nice and sharp around the edges there. We're just going to do the same thing and just tap that in. And make sure you don't touch the edge of this too much because you don't want to score the actual hub itself. And when it's seated, you'll hear this distinctive dunk. You'll hear that it's right in. There you go. That's completely seated. I've spun the drum over. Just want to get this just started. And I'll get my punch and we'll continue the process. Now to grease the bearings up. Same with the bearings. You're going to pay pretty good money for the bearings, so make sure you just pay a decent amount of money for some good quality high temp wheel bearing grease. I'm using Penrite in this case. It's not overly expensive, but you just want to make sure you use the good stuff. Now this is exactly the same as what I used before as well, and it's been pretty good. So I want to make my hands as clean as possible. I'm just going to grab a dollop of grease there, then get the bearing, and we're just going to feed it like just in, take little nibbles, and you can see there, see the little worms starting to come out of the bearing there. You just want to make sure you do that all the way around, or if you've got a bearing packer, which I should have but I don't, makes it so much easier. We've got grease all the way around there. Let's give it some extra around the outside there, and we're going to put some in the hub as well. So all this excess grease we're going to wipe around in here as well. Now there's a bit of conjecture on how much grease you should use. For me personally, I think use enough. Don't use too little. Whatever doesn't need using anyway is just going to come out of the bearings. It's not going to go anywhere as long as your seals are good. We'll now whack that bearing in there. Make sure you do the inner bearing first because we're going to fit the seal on this now as well. Get rid of any excess grease here because this is where the seal is going to go. Going to get the seal. Same deal with the seal. Just going to give it some very light taps. Now I hear some of you say, stop hitting it with a hammer. But as long as you don't overdo it, it's fine. Now what we want to do is just make sure that edge is flush with that edge there. Perfect. Grab a little bit of extra grease here and just give it a good whack on this seal here as well. Just remember this turns on the hub all the time and stops any excess grease from coming out and water from dust from going in. Same deal with the outer bearing. Fill this one up as well. And then we'll get our washer. I've just cleaned down the axle here, so that's nice and clean. I've also cleaned out the brakes as well. It might not look like it. They're a little bit grubby, but I like to actually use compressed air. Just make sure you wear the right PPE if you're going to do that. Otherwise, just some brake cleaner. And I'll just show you how the actual brakes work here as well. So for your adjustment, you can see down the bottom here, we've got this little wheel. And you can see that. And then behind it, we've got this little hole here. So what happens is you can get a little stumpy screwdriver like this, or maybe even a proper brake adjusting tool, and you can work out which way you need to spin that little wheel there. That'll turn left or right, up or down, and you just got to work out based on that thread there which way to turn it, and that will then spread out the brakes. The way the actual brakes work when you put your foot on the car brake is this little electromagnet here. It gets power to it. As it gets more power, it wants to grab onto the drum's spinning this way, so it'll pull out, hit the drum, and then you can see here how as we pull that around, these shoes want to spread out. They want to spread out inside the drum, like a clamping action inside the drum. Well, there you go. So just make sure that everything's intact, everything looks okay. The shoes themselves here, I would say these are starting to get down a touch. I'll replace them on the next service. And we just want to make sure that there's no scoring. Also, just on here, no big gouges or anything. There you go, that's how the brakes work. I'll put the drums back on now. I also forgot to mention as well, so on the front brake here on mine, I've got the handbrake attachment connected to it as well. On the back doesn't have a handbrake, but it's got the electromagnet in there as well. So you've got all 4 drum brakes do brake when you put your foot on the brake in the car. But when you put the handbrake on the Caravan, it pulls this cable here. That cable, if I can give it a nudge, you can just see that. You can just see that cam just start turning a little bit there, and it's basically the same action. It just pulls, spreads these out a little bit, opens them up, and just clamps against the drum. So there you go, that's the handbrake as well. Right, I want to pop the drum back on now. Just making sure you don't leave all the weight on the seal at the back there. Get on nice and even. Maybe a little twist. Making it look a bit harder than it really is, but anyway. And then we'll chuck our castellated nut on. You don't want to do these up dead tight, but we do want to make it so that it's a little bit tight. Just give it a... So that's fair, that's too tight. Oh, that's just going to wear your bearing straight away. They'll heat up too much. Want to back it off, and you'll find normally you'll have like a couple of holes maybe, one going this way, one going that way, say. So this one here, if I just sort of balance it out a little bit, I reckon this hole here is lined up. And then always use brand new split pins, never ever use the old split pins. Make sure they're big enough as well. So this one's exactly the same as the originals that come out. And we'll just pop, oh geez, they're massive split pins, a bit hard to cut. Cut that bottom one a little bit, and I'm just going to fold it over at the back there. Yeah, she's on. I'm also just going to check for play as well once the wheel's on, to make sure that there's no play and you've got that extra leverage with the wheel. And we'll chuck the cap on. There you have it. The drum's on. You're probably wondering, you had a red t-shirt on before, now you got a green one. Well, it's the next day. I had a bit of an issue with the high left jack. Hate the high left jack. Never ever go under the Caravan with it. It actually bent. But yeah, never ever trust a high left jack, I tell you. So I've got both wheels back on. If you've got a single axle Caravan, just make sure that you've got redundancy in place, i.e. when you're going to jack up, which you have to do for your brake adjustment, like I'll show you now, just make sure if the jack does fail, that you've got something else in place. So you can see up the front there, I've got a jack stand under the chassis as well. All right, so this wheel, you can see here, it spins nice and easily. So to make the adjustments, I've already worked out which way I've got to go. I've even put a little arrow on here as well. So I need to push up, I need to lever up on the little, don't think you can see inside there, but inside's that little wheel I showed you before. So what we're going to do is I'll pop that there, and then I'll get my screwdriver, and I'll find the little lug in there. There it is. And I just want to lever that adjustment up. You can feel it go click. And then I won't have to go too much because I've actually adjusted this a little bit before I put the drum on. And the wheel's actually getting a bit tighter. Because these little adjustments can go either way, they don't have a lock. Some of them have a lock and you can't go backwards. It spins pretty freely, but you can just feel there's a slight bit of drag on it. And that's quite nice. That's actually spinning quite nicely. I can just hear the drum rubbing on the shoes there. So that's a good adjustment. So I've adjusted all 4 brakes. They all feel really good. The handbrake come up nice as well. You can make adjustments on the handbrake at the front from your little nut adjuster there too. I'll take it for a run. I'll come back. I'll just jack it up again, each wheel individually, and just make sure that I've still got that same adjustment. It hasn't sort of loosened off a little bit. And I'll also check the wheel bearing play as well. So I've got all 4 wheels back on the ground. And last but definitely not least, I've done these up lightly with a rattle gun. Don't do them up hard with a rattle gun because you probably end up stretching the studs, breaking them at some stage. If you've got a torque wrench, that's even better. I've just got a breaker bar here at the moment. I'm just going to go around and just make sure that each nut is done up tight enough so it doesn't come loose. Now, after a few Ks, a bit of a drive, I'm also going to check these again just to make sure they haven't loosened off at all. When we're out cruising around, every couple of days I'll even grab the breaker bar out. I'll just leave this on the back seat or just near the back seats. It's really easy to get to, so it only takes me 5 seconds. I'll do that to the car as well. So there you have it. If you've got any questions about replacing your wheel bearings, adjusting your brakes, yeah, look, just leave your comments down below. I'm a mechanic by trade, so I've done this 1,000 times. If you don't have much mechanical knowledge, it's probably just easier to take it to the mechanics, deal with that. The rest of the service it on the Caravan, I'm pretty sure everyone's pretty capable of that. There you have it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.